May 17th, they have a second meeting, and they come together and they sign the agreement to found this stock association, and the document will be called the Buttonwood Agreement. And the association born of it was called the Buttonwood Association. What does Buttonwood mean? It's the name of a tree. It's the tree that was there on Wall Street that they used to gather under to do business, and under that tree they signed the document, so it was called the Buttonwood Agreement. What is Buttonwood? Buttonwood is another way of saying the sycamore tree. So you could call the document that started America's rise of financial power the Sycamore Agreement, and the association, the Sycamore Association, which later became named the New York Stock Exchange. On September 11, 2001, the World Trade Center collapsed, and as it fell, as we've seen, it sent a beam, it sent wreckage into the air, and it struck down a nearby object. That object was a tree. It was the sycamore tree, which is the symbol of America's foundation, the foundation of American financial superpower. What would the uprooting of a sycamore tree be? If America's financial power is founded under a living tree, what does a dead tree, what does a dead sycamore mean? If a living sycamore means the beginning, what does an uprooted sycamore stand for? And they actually put that sycamore on display, and it's a symbol of uprooting. And not only that, but on another anniversary of 9/11, a sculpture is unveiled. It's a memorial to 9/11. Of what? It's of the sycamore tree that was struck down, formed in bronze, formed of the root system. It's the uprooted sycamore tree, and they put it on display where? They don't put it at Ground Zero, they put it at another spot, they put it on Wall Street. God had allowed America's power to be planted and to take root and to branch over the world and to reach towering heights. So now, as America departs from God, the blessings begin to fade. And so here is a symbol that what was planted would be removed. If America does not turn back to God, it cannot maintain its blessings. And so another word from the prophet says this, God saying, what I have built, I will break down, and what I have planted, I will uproot. God gave a command to Israel called the Shemitah, or the seventh year, or the Sabbath year command. 6 years you will sow your field, in 6 years you'll prune your vineyard and gather its fruit, but in the seventh year shall be a Sabbath. So in the Shemitah, or the seventh year, the Sabbath year, all laboring on the land stopped, all sowing, all reaping, all harvesting, all the fruits were abandoned. On the last day, Elul 29, anyone who had a debt had to release it, or anyone who lent something, it was gone. Loans, credit, the nation's financial accounts were wiped away. The Shemitah was meant to be a blessing, but if the nation turned away from God, the Shemitah turns from a blessing to a judgment, to a sign of judgment. In Israel's history, the people would be driven from the land and the land would rest. And God said, now the land is going to keep its Sabbaths or Shemitahs. And so Israel was in captivity or exile for 70 years. Why? It was based on how many Shemitahs they had not observed. So the Shemitah also holds the key to the timing of the judgment on a nation. The Shemitah causes production to cease, labor to cease, buying and selling of produce to cease, and it wipes away the nation's financial accounts. So that can resemble an economic collapse. When did the economic collapse of America happen? This is the second shaking. It happened 7 years after the first shaking. It happened 7 years after 9/11. So if you didn't have 9/11, this would not have happened. That means even 9/11 is woven into the mystery, an ancient, ancient mystery of the Shemitah. When America was commemorating 9/11, the 7th anniversary, the second calamity was already beginning on Wall Street. And what happened? Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. Other companies went bankrupt. Debts and loans were wiped away. Financial accounts were wiped away. Shemitah, the bankruptcies, Shemitah, bailouts, foreclosures, Shemitah, nationalizations, crashes, swept over the world. It was a colossal Shemitah wiping out of financial accounts.
What started in America last year has now spread to every part of the world.
We're down 9% today. The Xetra DAX over in Frankfurt is down by 9%. The Paris market down by 9%. Austria, which was briefly suspended earlier on in the day, is down by nearly 11%.
So when was the peak of the financial collapse? It happened at the end of September in 2008. It was the greatest stock market crash in the history of Wall Street. And so when did this greatest crash take place? It took place on the 29th day of the month of Elul, on the exact biblical day specifically ordained to touch a nation's financial accounts. It took place on the exact biblical day that is a judgment to the nation that has driven God out of its life.
Traders here working the phones say a lot of their customers are freaked out, waiting to see how low the Dow will go.
We are just seconds ago until the start of trading at the New York Stock Exchange, and stocks are set to kick off lower a whole lot.
We're in the last days of this country surviving. And how in the world can we find the billions of dollars that we're borrowing from China and Japan?
What in the world is happening on Wall Street?
Two-year note yields went from 190 to 166 in the blink of an eye.
I have never live looked at the Dow Jones Industrial Board and seen a 600-point loss.
Who knows where this is going to end up?
And it marked the end of a 7-year period, and the key number of the Shemitah is 7. And so how much of Wall Street was wiped out that day? 7%. How many points exactly were dropped? 7, 7, 7.
Can't look at it after you buy it. It's so horrible.
And that was an end of a 7-year cycle. So there should be another event 7 years before that began it in the financial realm. The first crash took place on September 17, 2001, the greatest stock market crash in history up to that time. And it would keep that record for 7 years. So right there, you have the Shemitah. You have a 7-year period beginning with the greatest crash and ending with the greatest crash on September 29, 2008.
There is a little bit of a consternation down here about there being no bell. Our market reporters are standing by. Bob Pisani, have you ever seen anything like no bell?
Yeah, that's a little strange here.
Because the opening bell of Wall Street wouldn't sound. People took it as a bad omen. But what date was September 17th on the Hebrew calendar? And the answer is stunning. September 17th, 2001 was also the 29th day of Elul, the day when a nation's financial accounts are wiped away. So the two greatest stock market point crashes in the history of Wall Street up to that date happened on the exact, both of them, on the exact biblical day ordained to touch a nation's financial realm. Exactly 7 Hebrew years apart. It's mind-boggling. But even beyond that, Elul 29 comes around once every year, and that would be enough. But it's even more than that. Only one Elul 29 can start or end the Shemitah. And that comes around only once every 7 years. So when did the crash of 2008 happen? It wasn't only on Elul 29, it was on the specific exact Elul 29 that comes around only once every 7 years that can end the Shemitah or fulfill the Shemitah. In fact, when it was happening, when the markets of the world were crashing, at the same time in Israel, Orthodox Jews were symbolically erasing their debts. And that means that the other Shemitah, 2001, also took place on the one and only Elul 29 that can end the Shemitah. Who could have put this all together? Who could have put all these financial transactions and all these government decisions, a million things to make this happen? Not any human hand. And in fact, there's one more mystery of the Shemitah, that the Shemitah means literally in Hebrew, it can mean the release, but it can also mean the letting fall or the collapse, the letting collapse. So what was the Shemitah? Not only the collapse of the economy, according to an ancient mystery, but it's the letting collapse of the American-led world order. It's letting collapse America's prosperity that had been there, the leadership that had been there from the end of the Second World War. It's all collapsing. This is the Shemitah, the sign of judgment on a nation's economy and finance, for a nation that once knew God, but drove him out, a warning that its blessings will be removed if it does not turn back to God. There's a law in the Bible that for a truth to be established or a judgment to be pronounced, there has to be 2 or 3 witnesses testifying on it. Now, what happens if we bring this to a national level? The most dramatic witness of America under judgment is the proclaiming of the ancient vow of judgment that links America to ancient Israel, that links America to being a nation in defiance, that a nation that is being shaken and being called back to God. And so, could there be 2 or 3 witnesses? Well, we have seen the beginning of this in the Harbingers. The first witness comes on September 12, 2001. And this is the Senate Majority Leader on Capitol Hill the day after 9/11, when he says this at the peak of his speech. He says, "I know there's only the smallest measure of inspiration that can be taken
from this devastation. But there is a passage in the Bible from Isaiah that I think speaks to all of us at times like this. The bricks have fallen down, but we will rebuild with dressed stone. The fig trees have been felled, but we will replace them with cedars."
Second witness. Could there be another one? There is. 3 years later, virtually to the day, the second witness also gives testimony in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, September 11, 2004. Speaking of the same event linked to 9/11, the vice presidential candidate on the Democratic ticket in the same city proclaims this. He says, Today, on this day of
remembrance and mourning, we have the Lord's word to get us through. The bricks have fallen, but we will build with dressed stones. The sycamores have been cut down, but we will put cedars in their place.
And then he bases his entire speech around the ancient, ominous vow of Israel's destruction, each of them, without realizing what they're doing, pronouncing judgment on America and identifying it as the nation in defiance of God under his judgments. That's 2 witnesses. But the Bible says 2 or 3 witnesses. Now, a third witness on an even higher level, and that who will link it all together, even to the economic shaking, the shaking of America from 9/11 to now. The answer is there is a third witness, and the third witness is the President of the United States. It's evening, February 24th, 2009. The new president goes to Capitol Hill for the first time, 1 month after being inaugurated on a campaign of hope. He enters the House of Representatives.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
Goes to the podium. The nation's economy is still in free fall.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
The chamber quiets, and he begins. And after setting the stage of the magnitude of the economic crisis and collapse, he says this. He turns his speech and he says this. But while our economy may be weakened
and our confidence
shaken,
though we are living through difficult and uncertain times, tonight I want every American to know this. We will rebuild.
We will rebuild. It's one thing to say this at the site of destruction, but to say this at an economic crisis is a strange and unnatural voicing. The vow is now being linked not only to the first calamity, but to the second, the economic collapse.
Traders here working the phone say a lot of their customers are freaked out, waiting to see how low the Dow will go. They're focused on the Dow.
And one of the dynamics of the harbingers or the warnings is that they always surface, they always become especially visible, they're put on display. And so with this. It's amazing because throughout the world, the news services of the world, the internet, on television, on radio, in the press, they all are drawn to one particular statement of the president's words, of his speech. Of all the words he said, they focus on one. Headlines, CBS News, headlines, Obama, we will rebuild. CNN, Obama, we will rebuild. MSNBC, Obama tonight, we will rebuild. Times Online, Obama tells America, we will rebuild. Fox News, Obama says country will rebuild. Al Jazeera, Obama pledges U.S. will rebuild. Associated Press, Obama, we will rebuild. New York Times, Obama vows, we will rebuild. Isaiah 9:10, we will rebuild. The words go all over the world. And the president adds a second line. He says, we will rebuild.
We will rebuild. We will recover.
We will recover. Now, on the day after 9/11, the Senate Majority Leader, when he made his vow, he said specifically at the end of it, he said,
that is what we will do. We will rebuild, and we will recover.
We will rebuild, and we will recover. The exact same words. The president proclaims the same words as the first witness in the same building that has two wings. One is, the first witness proclaims it in the north wing, the Senate wing. The third witness, the president, proclaims it in the south wing, the House of Representatives. Listen to a commentary on Isaiah 9:10. It says this, the arrogant response demonstrates how stubborn and overconfident the people of Israel were. They thought they could determine their own destiny. The words of the president that night, he says this.
The weight of this crisis will not determine the destiny of this nation.
In other words, the bricks have fallen, but it's not going to matter. We will rebuild. And what would be the answer to America's problems? Just as with ancient Israel, it would be its own resources. The president says this.
The answers to our problems don't lie beyond our reach. They exist in our laboratories, in our universities, in our fields and our factories, in the imaginations of our entrepreneurs, in the pride of the hardest working people on earth.
The pride of the hardest working people on earth. In other words, with bricks and with cedars, we will rebuild. And then he adds this, he says this.
And the United States of America will emerge stronger than before.
The key of Isaiah 9:10 is that if you took the whole thing and summed it up, it's that we will emerge stronger than before. Now, if you take the words of a commentary on Isaiah 9:10 and you superimpose it, that which is on ancient Israel, and you superimpose it on the president's words, this is what happens. Listen to what you get from the commentary. They boasted that they would rebuild their devastated country. The president, we will rebuild, we will recover. Commentary, and make it stronger and more glorious than ever before. President, and the United States of America will emerge stronger than before.